Hey everybody, back at it again. um, yeah, I got today, and like time again. Like I said, something I got to do anyway. So I'm like, yeah, why do it on stream? Give me one moment. So one moment, I'm actually answering a message from someone on Instagram. So let me take care of that. Hold on. Oh, okay, there we go. Yeah, sorry. Second. The guy's Oh, hey Link, sorry. Hey Link, how's it going, man? Sorry, I'm answering. I'm talking to someone on Instagram actually right now and answering questions for. Probably not the greatest time for this. Tool bag. Are you like actually making the tool bag, or are you just like organizing the bag? What? Okay, nice. Are you in? Wait, I thought you just. I thought for your job you just drove stuff. You fix. Are you an electrician too? Gotcha. Gotcha. Okay, that makes a lot more sense. Gotcha. Okay. All right, that makes sense. Yeah. Pretty cool. Helicopter parent. Funny. Okay. All right. Sorry about. Oh my goodness. Oh my God, almost like 30 minutes. My bad. Yeah, sorry again. I was answering a question from somebody on. Yeah, just make sure I could answer that question. So kind of sidetracked. But okay, so what we're doing today is I'm continuing in the portfolio the uh the previous project I did for a client. Um, and so again to give a brief overview of that, it was a research tool that was used internally by their company. They had a desktop version already. It was very loaded, very, very busy. They wanted to have a mobile version, so long story short, was moved from the desktop version to be the lead designer for all their mobile applications. And so what you'll see here is I kind of detailed, my sketching process and the different, sketches that we did, right? We presented that to stakeholders, got their approval for it. I was like, perfect. All right, so then we have, kind of low fidelity, and it was, a few more details than this, right? They were just happy with the workflow, right? And so then we started moving to mid fidelity. I said, okay, well, let's start attacking these screens one by one, and let's start focusing more on it. So, for example, home screen, we went through that, did user testing, talked with users about what they need, what they really need from it. We did A/B testing. It chose this one here to explain how it works. And this, what I did because this project was under pretty dense NDA, I removed but for food, so we'll see how well that translates there. So in this app, generally, how it works is, let's say that there are multiple databases. There's one giant database of food, and so it you can search for, you can do a general search, just search whatever you'd like. You can search Apple, right? But as you can imagine, a general search that's that general, you're going to get tons and tons and tons of results back, right? So what they had, in addition to that, is they had a way to do a more focused search by category. So, right, so you could fill out, just so it was more focused way of doing it. So after you fill out that form, or let's say you did your general search here, you get a screen that has these you get back these little cards with the search results. Search results also had some minor information about it, so you can give you an idea if you're kind of going in the right direction. So when you opened up one of those, it opened up a full card with all the information about it. So down here, have the list of all the information about that item in its profile. And you also had a tab where you can tap over to relationships, and you can see other things that are associated, have some type of relationship. You can also tap on those, right? And so the idea is that they can do research very deeply, go as far as they want, they can go shallow as they want, right? I mean, they could just go on forever, go through 50, right? But of course, that adds some extra challenges to it, right? Someone going 50 profiles deep, pretty far, and keeping in mind, having this full screen like this, it's like, okay, well, you're only seeing one card at a time. Well, how how's that gonna work? Super great, how do we, like, good, you want to be able to see the full card because a lot of them have a lot of information on them, but you're only seeing one at a time. How do you know where you're at? How does that work? Then, how do you make the navigation more friendly? So, those were some of the challenges that we came up with, and that we found, and we started working on it. So last time, there's a music. Do roulette random food you can get. For the people like, I don't want to do my job. I just want to play around. Just food roulette. Yeah, just throw a random food at me. Hold on one sec. This my full focus on. So the last thing we talked about is after we got our mid fidelity stuff right, start populating with real world data, or real data that you would see, which is important because you need to see it. Is this? It's like cool. Like conceptually, it might fit, but is this gonna fit our thing? Yeah, it's very important that be done. And then this project, like I said, one of the big things is that there can be tons and tons and tons of information. We're talking 300 lines data. So it can get pretty crazy. That means that conceptually, maybe conceptually it doesn't work. So it's important to do that. So we did that. We put together a mid fidelity workflow, right? And stakeholders were cool with that. And so it was like, okay, cool. So let's start taking a look at it. Let's make sure that stakers are cool with that kind of general workflow. They're still happy with that workflow, right? Makes sense to them. So let's start looking at this stuff and making sure that the users are good with it. In terms of, and of course, like I mentioned, when we were in, low fidelity, or when we were in mid fidelity, like this stage and this low fidelity, there are things that we tested. So it's not like we go with start with the stakeholders and then we do testing. There's testing at different intervals, and there's some things that we have to get approval for. You got to be cool with us doing, designing that specific something. So it's like, well, unless we get approval from them, there's no point in going super far with it. And anything that we show them, they know this is very non-specific. It may not necessarily look like this. So that's kind of like, you start working for an actual client or a company. It's like, that's some of the things that you have to. So, for example, we looked at the form itself, right? And we noticed that some of the forms can be really, really long. This one of them would have like 49 fields long, right? Insanely. So, of course, that poses a lot of problems, right? We already talked with users about it. And so we tried a couple of different ways of doing it. And this is the one that they really liked. But for reasons I had mentioned in the previous stream, it's not bad, but it's not scalable. And there was one that they said that they were like, they liked this one second best. This one they liked the most. They said the second best one. They said they really did like it, they were just like, they're like, okay, that's interesting. I think they had never seen anything like that. So curious about it. Like I had mentioned, I also had not designed when I did that. I did not design this super well. Then it was just conceptual. I was just trying something. I wasn't even fully expecting that they actually liked. So it could have been that I did not design this super well, and that's why strong a push. But generally, I recommended that we go forward with this approach because it's very scalable. It doesn't matter how long this will support that. It'll provide all the functionality they need, give them all the flexibility they want. Works for any kind of workflow, whatever they're doing. It could be. So that was something we did with that. Just something to come back to because it's bigger. The next thing we looked at is and looking at the cards here. So talking with users, got with them and showed them the cards. They liked them. They already liked the design. They already seen the. And so we just wanted to say like, okay, we want to talk with them and find out how do they use it, right? Because it's one thing to say like, oh, I like the design. It's like, okay, cool, but but let's find out like how do they use it? How could we improve upon it, right? So we talk with them, and things they had mentioned like, oh, we actually want to be able to send this to somebody. Usually we have to do like a screenshot and message it to someone, but it would be great if we could send it, easily. And I was like, okay, cool, and then it was a discussion of, sometimes these get really, really long, right? Like the forms. Like, yeah, sometimes I might open a record and I'm just kind of looking, I don't know what I'm looking for. I said, but other times I'm looking for something specific, but because it's so long, find it. They were like, okay. So we came up with staying within our framework and the design kit that we were starting to build out. We were able to build some extra features in. Better, right? We had a table. The contents, the quick scroll thing that we pulled from the form, right? Perfect. It already exists in the application, so no problem. I'm having a keyword search, a feature. They loved that. Just look up any word you want, or even table. It can take you right to it, and then being able to save them in like off to the side somewhere. If you ever want to go back to it. And this is where we're picking up today. Same thing with the information card, but looking at how we can improve the relationship section of it. Because this right here is a very different workflow than this. In fact, with this, it's pretty much, same exact workflow as the search results, which this is pretty feature packed as well. So it was like, okay, this is actually a bit of a challenge here, because we're trying to do this, but do it on an even smaller screen, and yet they might be approaching this the same way they do this. They're both, one has limitations on how do we do that, and so explain how we did that. This very special feature, a form that we can. This is probably one of the proudest, favorite moments of working on that project. This was user testing, man. This is where everything changed for, to be honest, the entire project. Because they changed their minds about user testing after we went through a tough one. So actually, I might start with this. You know what? I'm really eager at it. Over it. So I think actually I want to start with this one. So the issue is this. So say for example, and hopefully this makes sense. But it's tough because, like I said, it's all NDA, so I can't use the same. Grim, hi, how are you? How are you doing? It's been a while. Well, been a while since I've been streaming, so. But how are you? So hopefully, conceptually, it makes sense. Like I said, I can't use the same information they. If I did, it would make sense, make more sense. But so what I want you to imagine is this, right? So, looking at this, the way this works, right? You can look up fruits, vegetables, meats, fish, nuts and seeds, and dairy, right? Those are all, as you can imagine. Just got here. Great to see you in action. Yeah, well, welcome. Yeah, good to see you again. Good to see you. Yeah, I had some time. I have I had a lot of time last couple weeks. Like I wanted to update my portfolio, and I was like, why don't I do a live stream? How are things going with you? I believe you said that you got a job in UX, right? Actually, like you were on your second job, weren't you? Possibly. Maybe I'm misremembering. How? Yeah. What's going on with you? Going on with your journey? So to explain, my bad. To explain, so you can sue for fruits, vegetables, meats, fish, needs, all this stuff is part of like one database, right? So if you searched for something very specific here and search for like super crazy Fuji apple, general search, it would show up. It would show up in this list here. Same thing, if you looked up fruits and looked up super crazy or whatever I said, Fuji apple, it would show up there too, right? Because they're both part of the same database. These are just there to kind of filter, I guess, kind of like stick a filter on it right from the get-go. Obviously, if you looked it up under vegetables, it's not going to show up because it's not considered a vegetable. And that's the other thing. All the fruits, they have a category. Fruits, they're underneath that category, right? So that's the and they're actually all part of the same database. But like for example, you see recipes down here, it's like, oh well, that can't, that is actually, imagine that is actually another database entirely. Nope, not yet, still in the first. Okay. How's it going though? How's your job going? So imagine though that this goes to a different database entirely. Right? So if you opened up the form for recipes and looked up super crazy Fuji apple, you may not get it. It may not show up because maybe that entry is not in that database. So it's like, so interesting, likewise, if you looked up like some kind of recipe in here, right? And let's say that there's a recipe that's in here, right? And you know the name of it and you searched it here, it may not show up here in this database either because again, it's not in that database, right? You actually have two databases, or 3 or 4 or 5, right? So, and that's how it was with the client's work. So the issue, I think you know where I'm going with this, is that so that's pretty annoying, isn't it? Especially when, let's say there's two fruit databases. Maybe there's two fruit databases. That's pretty annoying that you're like, so if I'm looking for something, I have to open up this one, search. If I don't find it, I have to open the other one. I have to do it all over again, but looking at the other one, right? So that's right, but that's a real thing. And yet they had to do it like one at a time. So obviously the solution was, well, we need to figure out a way to allow them to search both at the same time, right? Which at first you might be thinking, oh, why can't we just merge both of these databases? Right? Maybe there's a reason you can't, right? Maybe one is collected by another company. I know, okay, so that's not going to happen. Okay, well, why couldn't we make it so that obviously this app can search one or the other, why don't we make it so that they search both of them? Well, there's a further problem with that. Um, we're gonna go with 4. Let me see. Word. One has a different. Each one. But see, here's the problem. Each database, um, each database requires a different combination of data in order to complete the search in the first place. So, to give you an example, let's say that, like this base database here, right? You can just look up the word apple. Just look up the name of the fruit as apple, and it will work. But let's say another database says, well, no. You have to give us the name of it, and the color of it, and the shape of it. And then you can search for it, right? You know, and imagine again, like, well, imagine there's 4 different databases, right? And they all have a different combination. Like one might be name, color, and seed content. Another might be shape, texture, seed content, right? Imagine that they all have different requirements, and different combinations, right? It's like, okay, but in terms of like data, accepted data, they're the same. They just require certain combination to complete it. Don't ask me why. They just do. So imagine that's the case. Like, okay, gotcha. So we want them to be able to search multiple databases at once, but we need to somehow make it so that we can, like, meet the criteria, right? You have to be able to meet the criteria of all of them in order to complete a search looking for 4 of them. But there are, but there's challenge, but that, and it's sound, and I know. And a simple solution is just how you use validation, right? Validation is where, let's say, like you're filling out like a form, like maybe you're going to pay for something, right? And it tells you to fill out your credit card information. You fill out your credit card information, and you try to pay, and it's like, oh, wait a second, you didn't put your like your expiration date in, like how the field turns red and says it's required. That's called validation, right? It's a visual way to let you know, hey, you're missing information, right? So that is the first. So that was the first thing that we had discussed, is like, okay, so we just do, like that's the first thing. Like, well, we just use validation for that, right? But here's where it gets even crazier. So let's say you got 4 databases, and they all have different combinations, and let's say one database, for example, I'm just throwing this out there. I'm not saying this is. But let's say one database has 16 possible combinations that it can take. Here's the trick with that. First off, here's the trick with that, though. So, for example, let's. I'm going to give you a simple example. Let's say that the requirements are that you need to have name, color, size, or flavor. In other words, let me give it to you again. Let's say there's 2 possible combinations: name, color, size, name, color, and size, or name, color, flavor. Right? You have one or the other, right? How do you communicate to them that size and flavor are actually, you just need one or the other, right? You just need one or the other. How do you let them know? Using the form, looking just like this, how do you communicate to them that they only need size or flavor, like only one of those, right? So the solution that they had suggested was, we'll just make it so that name, color, size, and flavor are red, like they all say required, but when they put in size or flavor, the other one will disappear, right? Which you're like, okay, you know, that might be okay, right? Another approach someone had wanted us to do, like have a message up at the top that would list which ones you need to do, right? And then they would disappear as you did it, which I'm like, that's fine, but again, some of the databases required at least like 5 fields on their one required like 5 fields on their own. That's going to get long. Keep in mind that the text has to be big enough to read, right? So it's got to be, for me, it's got to be at least 12. I would love to have 14, but it's got to be at least 12 in order for people to be able to see it. And so, I mean, and then you got to put it in a space where it's, you know, very clear that it's a message, but it's going to start pushing stuff down, and it's just going to get, you know, it's, yeah. There's all sorts of problems. And like I said, and that is just one simple combination that was just one simple combination I gave you of name, color, size, flavor. What if I told you that there's another one? What if I told you there's another one where the honestly, I think what I need to do. Let's say I need to make a longer. Let's say season is one of the required fields that are required in the combination, but season is below the fold. They can't see it, right? And so you might think, okay, well, season is just just one right before below the fold, right? So, you know, but again, it's like, well, what if it's even further down the list, right? Because that is exactly what happened. There's something even further down the list, and it's like, well, you know, it's like, well, combine that with this idea of, oh, just make the validation change, you know, let it be dynamic. The problem is, it looks like a Christmas tree. It looks like just lights everywhere. And I'm like, it gets confusing, right? And then they come to realize, oh, there's one below the fold that I'm missing. Well, now their question is, wait, there could be one, like, that means they have to check below the fold every time to see if they've missed something or not, right? Now, that's an inherent problem with it as well. Now, generally, too, the search button is this is the other thing. The search button also acts as a validation, right? Until this search button turns blue and you're allowed to do a search, right? It tells you that you're missing something, right? So the search button helps with that, you know, can help, you know, aids with the validation as well, too, right? You know, if there was a field missing below the fold, the search button can kind of communicate that, right? And someone can check. Right? So you might, you know, so we were like, okay, so that might solve it. Here's another problem. Let's say, you know what, I'm gonna go ahead and do this act. To help better understand. Let me see it. Name, color. Effects. I'm gonna make this one no requirement. And the database 03, let's say it's like a color, shape, season. Okay. So this one has, okay, it's got 2 things in common with database 2. Technically, database 1, you know, has no requirements whatsoever, right? But it also has shape and season, right? And let's say there's and season is below the fold. But let's say, oh, you know what? Let's say that if it's not color, then you need size, shape, and season. I'm trying to. Well, hopefully this makes some kind of sense. I guess I'll have to actually figure this out so I can pull out the scenario. But imagine this where name, color. Okay. So imagine right, so imagine the requirements I'll have to make up a database for later. Right? So okay, so database 1 has no requirements, right? You want to search all 4 of them, right? So database 1, it doesn't matter. As long as you put one field in there, you're good to go. Database 2, you need name, color, size, or flavor, right? Size and or. To be honest, it should. Technically, you can do can't and or. And then database, so right, name, color, size, and or flavor. Database 3 is color, color, shape, and season, or size, shape, and season. So that means that if you put in name, right, you're good. Database 1 is good to go. You put in color, okay, we're getting there. And then you put in size, right? Well, that means that database 1 and database 2 are good to go. Database 3 is not, though, right? Because you have size. Actually, let me do this. Do this. You have color and size, but you don't have season. So, what happens? Because you are able to complete a search using database 1 and 2, right? You can do that. Those are valid. You have a proper valid. What color would the button be? Would it be gray or blue? Now I know what you're thinking. You'd be like, well, it would be gray because you haven't filled the requirements for the rest of them. That's not how they want to do it. They wanted to make it insanely flexible so that you can kind of, yeah. Anyway, but you can see, like, okay, so there's times that the validation will lie to you. It could, by the way they want to do it, the validation could lie to you. It could say, hey, yeah, oh yeah, you could totally search, but what you don't know is, yeah, it'll search, but it'll only search those 2 databases. The third one will not be included. Even though that button is blue and you can search, it won't consider database 3. And again, you need to communicate to them that, you know, if this is the way it's going to be, you need to communicate to them, you know, what will happen. You know, they'd said, well, how about we just have it so that when you press the search button, a message pops up saying, hey, this is only going to work for database 1 and 2, but it won't, you know, do database 3. Do you want to continue? And I said, yeah, that's good that you're informing them. I'm like, but that's insanely annoying. Like, insanely annoying. Like, that means that you'd be like, that I'm like, you would just be putting stuff in, checking, you know, go back, put more stuff in, checking. And I'm like, you know, I'm like, it'd be insanely frustrating. It's like, imagine going to, like, the checkout at the grocery store and the thing is having trouble scanning your items, right? And or I'll give you an example. I go to the grocery store like late at night, and I go late at night so that I can get they'll have stuff that they mark like 50% off, right? So it has a barcode sticker on it where the barcode is for 50% off, but sometimes they don't cover the actual barcode of the actual item. And so if you scan that barcode, it'll register as full price. So this workflow that I was trying to explain, the workflow they were suggesting, I'm like, it's pretty much like, imagine going through the grocery store, right? And you're trying to check out 4 items and you keep scanning the wrong barcode. You know, it's like, okay, if we're going to do that, then there needs to be an easy way to like remove that old barcode and get back to work. But it's like, it's still insanely, it's like, it's a crazy like ping pong game here. And I'm like, and they're honestly not going to stand for it. And I know they wouldn't because we put this through testing. So I am totally getting ahead of myself because this was, right. So anyway, no, right. The validation is right because we try to do it that way. It's just like stuff is moving all over the place. Mandatory mandatory fields. Yeah. Yeah, my battery ROM. Yeah, mandatory fields, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, the approach I'm not gonna lie. I'll put it this way. This was whew, okay. Yeah, I'm already getting. This was a I had there was an approach that we actually came up with a long time, a year ago, and the users loved it. But I guess when we came back to this, stakeholders were like, no, we want to be able to do it this way. I'm like, and you know, like I said, I'm like, okay, yeah, let's explore it, because usually I'm always open to do it, because I'm like, usually when someone sees it, they're like, oh yeah, that's not gonna work. I don't have to, you know, do any crazy explain. I don't have to make anyone feel bad, right? That's generally like how I handle it. Yeah, they somehow just doubled down on it. Yeah. But I did come up with a solution. I mean, like I said, we already knew what the solution was. Like it's a winner. And they agreed. It was actually my last day. I was like, listen, take it or leave it. Here's how it should be. Okay, here's how it should be. You want to do it right, here's how it should be. And then they liked it. I was like, great. I'm glad that we came to a consensus before I left, because I was like, yeah. Yeah. And that's the and that was the big issue, Aram, is that this example I'm providing right here, these requirements, this is tame, insane. Like I said, one of the databases had 16 possible combinations, right? 16. And then another one might have like 8. And another one might have like 6. And some of them, yeah. Yeah, this was like yeah, this was an app that, yeah, there were very specific databases with very specific information. It wasn't web-based at all. Like, it wouldn't check the web or anything. Yeah, it was a very specific very, very specific tool. Yeah, it's yeah. And then like some of the databases had and like I said, now the other thing is that, let's say these 3 databases, the nice thing is they have in common, but they have in common the same information, just for, you know, they just require different combinations of them before they can continue search. But let's say database 4 has some fields that are not even present, you know, are not, you know, required by these databases. They don't have it, right? So that adds a whole nother layer of complexity to it. So here's what we. So here is I kind of show what we. Oh my. Ooh. Okay. Let me see. So we did try, and like I said, if I have enough time, and I like to include, I guess what I would call a literal method, right, of doing it, right. So I included a so I like to include what I guess you can call like the literal method, which is where we did where I tested, like, okay, let's say we just went straight validation. I'm going to give them a task that requires it to kind of like sort of light up like a Christmas tree, right? Even though I know that approach, even though I'm pretty sure they're not going to like it, I like to include it. Like I mentioned, because one, it kind of acts like a little bit of a control, right? If there's a method that they shouldn't like, and they don't like it, I'm like, yeah, okay, good. I know for sure, like, there's nothing wrong with the test. I know that they shouldn't like it. But also, two, like I mentioned, with A/B testing, the problem is the problem and testing in general, to be honest, is that you keep in mind that when you're showing designs and stuff to the users, they will. Some of them may comment. Some of them may be good enough to say something different, but psychologically, they're only typically going to comment on what you show them. Right? So let's say, for example, in this example where I did, user testing with them, right? And I showed them these three things, right? If I ask them, okay, tell me which one you like best. And they're like, oh, I like this one the best. And you're like, okay, perfect. You're like, okay, they said they like this one the best. And it's like, well, but it's like, yeah, they like this one the best of the three you showed them. But that doesn't mean that is the best solution, right? They only know what you put in front of them. Like I said, some users may say, I like it, but here's what I don't like about it, right? They may be the type of person that will expound on it a little bit more, right? But I don't approach it from pick one of these three. You have to pick one of these three, unless I guess that was the situation. But I ask them, okay, how do you feel about this one? And I ask, okay, what do you like and don't like about it? Because maybe it's possible there's a fourth version of this that I haven't thought of. Maybe they say, I like this about this, but hate about this. I like this, but not this. I like this, but not this. Maybe there's a way I can well, maybe I can take the things they liked from all three of them and put them into a fourth possible design and then test that. And they say, yeah, that's perfect. Right? So that's why I approach it, that way, where I will purposely, if I have like 5 designs, I'm not going to extend tests just for the sake of putting a bad thing in there, right? But like I said, even though I'm pretty sure they weren't gonna like this and they didn't, but still they'll have reason. I ask them for the reasons why, because that's really honestly what most important. Yeah, so I purposely do that. So let's say, for example, one of the ones I did test with them. So if it depends. It depends. It depends on where we're at. Yeah, like for this specifically, like for these specifically, like, yeah, I was pretty specific. user testing. It depends. So like for example, you know, this one for example, this one was um, I do ranking too. It really, yeah, it really depends. Like for this one, this was, you know, the issue here. Like for this form here, it's like there isn't really much wiggle room in the design of it. It was like, you know, this is pretty much the design of it, right? The big issue for this one was navigating it, because some of them can be really really long, right? And so what I was testing was different methods for navigating, you know, through the form to find what they need. And I gave them a task to fill out certain fields that they had fields like kind of like all over the place, right? I gave them like a really frustrating and worst case scenario type thing. And so for this, I was specifically testing, you know, methods for navigation. It didn't even necessarily have to work exactly that way. More in a conceptual, you know, more conceptual way. I mean, they were designed. I mean, we were far along enough in design that it's more than like. I mean, it's more than likely how it would look. But like looking conceptually for how they would do it. So I mean, that was very specific. But oh yeah, I mean, throughout, yeah, all throughout all of this, like even, you know, when we finished designing it, I'd send it in like I send like an email. If it's already been discussed, like I'll send an email and send it to users and say, you know, what do you think of this? You know, if it's just one, you know, just to, you know, see their thoughts on it, I tell them like, open this up on your phone and, you know, tell me what your thoughts are. There's been one thing I did for this, we had to look at for this, was looking at having, like, this is, I guess you call it list form, right? And I was suggesting like having a grid version of this. Because one thing I had learned through user interviews is, which was pretty shocking to me. I was like, man, how is no one, I don't know. I was like, because this stuff, this right here existed before I was even there. And so I asked them about this, and they said these minor values here were not helpful to them. They're like, those don't help us at all. It's a complete waste of space. And I'm like, they've had these for like 4 years. I'm like, has no one ever talked to you about this? Like, not even a little, you know? And it was unanimous. They're like, oh yeah, this doesn't help at all. I'm like, huh, interesting, you know? So I learned, you know, so when I learned that, I was like, okay. But like I said, this was, they wanted us to design it just like the desktop. So we had, you know, we had restrictions, right? And so I was like, okay, well maybe we can have a grid view of this, right? Because obviously, like, fitting more of these on screen is better for them, right? So I was like, okay, maybe we could do like a grid view of these, you know, where they don't have these minor values, right? And so, and you know, and when you, you know, and so when you consider that, and then, you know, I had combinations of, you know, like list mode without these, you know, grid, you know, both of them have these, you know, and so it's like, you know, a bunch of different combinations of them. And so like that example, I sent them to users and said, you know, what, you know, give me your top 3. I think I typically go for a top 3. Like, yeah, tell me what your top 3 are. Assign gold, silver, and copper. Hi, Be there. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. And so, yeah, because like stuff like that, it's kind of like, you know, it's like at that point we're so restricted that it's like we're really not allowed to change. We're really not allowed to change anything, or like we've designed deep enough where it's like, yeah, we really can't. There's really not much else to mess with. Like this design. Oh, go get food. Go get food. Or like, you know, they've seen, you know, the users have said they like this design, right? We just, at this point, we're just talking little micro things, right? And so, yeah, at that point, I sent them all. I said, give me your top three. What are your top three? And I'd love for you to explain why. Um, and then I kind of see kind of like where that falls. Because at that point, it's like, there's really not, really not, much else we can do other than that. So, I do a combination. For example, like this, just navigation. It was very specific user testing for that navigation. And then, of course, as we start putting it all together, we make a change and add it to it. We're showing it to them and saying, what are your thoughts on this? Look to you. Can you please open up on your phone? Tell us how it looks. The Figma file open. It wasn't coded or anything. But oh yeah, and just get general feedback. Tell us like, what do you hate? What do you love? Right? See if there's any comparison. But oh yeah, there's a lot of looking from macro point of view, looking at micro point of view, like, and it's constantly going. Because to be honest with you, it's pretty simple. I wasn't allowed to like have a if I'm showing them something and saying, hey, how do you think this looks, and give me your top three. They wouldn't let me like have a meeting with them about it. Understandably so, because they're like, that seems like a waste of time. So I just sent them an email. So, but yeah, it's user testing, plenty of discovery. I'm really, really big on discovery. Like I said, for this example, I mean, I know that they're like, oh, we've been doing this for 4 years. And I'm like, okay, cool. I was like, okay, so tell what you guys think, just in general. Oh, are they? Yeah, it can be. It's yeah. What's your like range of views? Let me. So like I said, like even though they've had this for 4 years and they assured me that everyone loves it, and so I'm like, okay, yeah, sure, I absolutely trust you, and I will just be like, oh, let me ask, yeah, what do you guys think of this? And then they tell me it was more of like discovery, and I'm like, oh, they hate this, huh? Interesting, huh? Like I said, I'm like, no one's ever actually talked to you about it, huh? So okay, ed tech, educational tech. Oh, gotcha. I mean, it's not too bad though. I mean, it's kind of nice to have, at the very least, to know who your user and your target audience is. I mean, that's the most important thing. Because for some projects, they have a hard time figuring that out. Gotcha. I do the same. Like whenever I did discovery, generally when I do user testing, I don't like having more than one user in at a time because I'm worried that they will kind of they may say something just to agree with somebody else rather than how they really feel. When I do discovery, I actually like to have multiple people because I mean, one, it's faster, but also two, I'm like, you know, they in that environment, they're just generally perfectly fine with just saying what they think. And then sometimes they'll say, you know what, I agree with what he said, and it's like, good, that's two people. To have everything. Does your the company you work for, do they design for like their own, like internally? Like are the teachers and school admins, like are they employees? Or is this app or is this are these applications for like just teachers and school admins and like that? Having every yeah, that's honest with you, that's pretty much the approach of that was kind of the approach of this client. It can it can be annoying. It carries its own challenges for sure. I gotta say it was kind of nice. Like on this project, because it's internal, it was easier to find participants because they're also like, yes, we have to use this thing. Yeah, we want this thing to be good. So thank you so much for asking for our input. Um, there's another client that I'm looking at right now that I might be joining, and they are a power utility company, right? So, and they're a big one too. So I mean, their audience is everybody in like for 5 states full, and it's like, holy crap! Like how? Okay, gotcha. Okay, all right. Let's see. um, yeah, it's So I mean, that changes things, right? Because now you're like, man, how do I talk to people? Now, of course, the scope it's not now their scope is not like the project I would be doing. I hope they yeah, it's like infinite, right? You're like because you're like, well, everybody needs power, right? You're like, well, pretty much anyone whose house runs on electricity, that's who. Okay, well, that's a lot of customers. So you're like, okay, but of course, no, there should be no project that's at least there should be no feature or tool that is designed for every person, right? So, like for example, we're like, oh, we're gonna make an app that helps people track their electricity, their electricity, use, right? It's like, well, right from the get go, it's like now that's obviously designed for everybody to use, but realistically, who's gonna use it, right? So, I mean, that helps narrow it down a little. That kind of makes it less daunting. It's like, okay. Um, all right, it's not everybody. Granted, I would try to find some type of hope they would have some type of data, like for the actual users of the applications or some. See if we can get it that way. But I would also include like ones that don't use it. Again, I'd love to know what they would want us to do to make it to use it, right? To get them to use it. So, um, but yeah, once you are able to narrow it down a little further, it becomes less daunting. But yeah, yeah, when they approached me, I was like, okay, wow, this is gonna be something. So, in fact, hold on, I'm gonna do it later. Getting back to this, so I love talking. In fact, that was my problem. I was doing the interview. I talk a lot. When it's another designer on the other end of the table, I end up talking a lot because I just love talking about it. I could already see it. But they're like, I mean, they enjoy it too, but I think they also be like, oh, we don't have a lot of time. Like, quite literally talking. I mean, it's not like I was off topic. Like it was on topic. Yeah, and they're like, hey, hey, we have like 10 minutes left. Can you talk about this? And I'm like, oh, yeah. Oh man, I'm so sorry. I am so sorry. Yeah, let me talk about that. I'm like, oh, okay, that's good. I just enjoy it so much, man. I'm gonna fix. Um, yeah. So to demonstrate, we tried using the the validation this the typical validation method. But yeah, I love this stuff so much. So the issue with this, though, with the general validation method, so the validation, though, can be very messy and confusing. Like I said, it looks like a Christmas tree, turn on and off, on and off, on and off. Some of the fields are below the fold, and then right. And so this was the problem with the very literal method. This here, right? And like I said, and then keep in mind that when we're designing for this, I'm also thinking about the future, right? Like maybe this database has 16 possible combinations, right? But maybe there'll come another one and we solve that problem, right? But what if there's one that's has 50 possible combinations, right? It's like, well, now we have to like redesign this thing. Like, no, we need to have a scalable solution so that it's future proof, right? Especially because we were like, yeah, there'll probably be more databases added as time goes on, right? So we need a solution properly. If this doesn't work, if this is not going to work with 4 databases, then it's not going to work for 5 or 6. The other, I'm trying to think, not my head, but really what was very apparent to me is this. I was like, well, what is the problem? Like, what is the problem? The problem is the form, right? That's honestly what the issue is. And so that's the thing. It's like, well, the problem is the form itself, right? The form, is very long. I said in this example it isn't, but the form is very long, right? And so, and like I said, the issue is, the big issue is communicating to the user what they need to do, right? Communicating that, okay, you need to have name, color, size, or flavor, one or the other, right? Well, you need to be able to communicate that. And the thing is, it's like, just a form, like just using validation and colored fields, it's just not going to do it. We tried using color combinations, right? Where database 1 is red, 1 is blue, and 2 is blue, and like 3 is like purple, right? And they suggested that. And I put it, like I said, anytime they have a suggestion, I will put it together, because even if I know it's a bad idea, I'm like, well, it's easier. I'd rather them see it themselves. That's a bad idea, right? And so I was like, okay. I'm like, well, here's the and they're like, okay, we color code it. It's like, okay, but here's the problem. Color, appears in database 2 and 3. What color, if this is blue and this is purple, well, what color should the field be then? They're both, so what color should that be? And then again, I was like, well, in addition to that, there needs to be some color-coded something somewhere. There's got to be a menu where it tells you like what color goes to each database, right? And I'm like, there's nowhere to fit it on here, so there would have to be a side menu that does that. And their thing was, they're like, we don't want side menus. You want to just be fluid. I'm like, the thing is, though, I'm like, you have to communicate to them. They need to know what they have to do. And they would be like, oh, training. I'm like, no, you cannot. No, enough with this training stuff, right? I'm like, no, you cannot. Training is not a substitute for bad design. I'm like, because training, dude, come on. No one remembers anything from training, right? They learn from doing and doing well. And so, right, so we had all sorts of, we went back and forth. Essentially, here, this was very, very simple. Um, essentially, when I explained, I said, here, the problem is the form. Using a form itself to communicate what they have to do, it just doesn't work, right? We need another way of communicating to them. But of course, it's like, well, we don't have room for instruction. Right? It could, but come on, we just need to somehow, communicate to them. So at the time, I said, what the workflow should be though is it should not try to ping all of them at the same time. It should they should choose what exactly they want to look up. So let me see. You know what? I'll grab this. Wait, no. Duh. Go ahead and and screen. We have them, they already exist. And so the solution that no worries, Aram. Thank you so much for stopping in. It was great talking. I'm glad everything's going well. But yeah, thank you so much for stopping in. Take care. I'm um what I did, I added blue stroke. Added instructions. So that pretty much what I told my I was like, the problem is the form, right? Is that the form is not, and like I said, I'm like, the form is not designed to communicate that much information, especially when it's that subtle. It's not designed for that, right? So you really can't rely on it to do that. And I also don't want to. Essentially, they wanted to brute force it. I'm like, that was pretty much the issue. I wanted to brute. I have to, I gotta come up with the actual. Right, so they just kind of really wanted to brute force it. Like, I explain, I'm like, the thing is, the more we try to, like, even if we're able to brute force it, let's say, we're able to brute force it once, I'm like, but that doesn't mean, I'm like, yeah, maybe we could brute force it for the 4 databases, but that doesn't mean it's going to work when we add a 5th and a 6th. You have to, the problem with brute forcing is it only helps you for that situation. But as soon as you get another one, you're back to, force it again. So, so, so pretty much what I told him is, um, the way it would work is they would choose that first, that the way it will work, I would suggest is they choose what databases they want to go for, right? And then based on that, the form would change, right? So if they picked all 3 of them, it would just direct them to simpler form. I'm actually getting ahead of myself a little bit. You know what? Before I show the solution worked, here was something else where they were like, okay, and I tell them, I said, they have to be able to know, we have to communicate to them several things, right? We have to communicate to them, okay, well, they have to be allowed to choose what database they want to search, right? I'm like, because maybe they don't want to search all, right? So we need to give them the ability to choose what they want to search. Right, allow them to search the databases they want. They need to, they need to know what the requirements are. They need to know when they can complete a search. They need to be able to see what the requirements are for the entire field as a whole, right? So something else that they they wanted to do is they said, okay, this was like this was a design they had tried a long time ago. They had a developer had done it a long time ago. Didn't have a designer yet. It was completely his idea. His idea was to have chips. So these chips would across here they would represent the different databases, right? By color symbol. Color alone is not 508 complete. Color and symbol would tell you like if you're good, if they're if they are missing something, right? For like, oh, this database is not, you haven't met the requirements for it yet, or process of it's completed, right? It would communicate that, and you could toggle them on and off if you want. Of course, how would that be set up? Oh, a horizontal scroll. Of course, I'd mentioned like the problem with the horizontal scroll. Again, problems I talked about before. I'm like, you can't see. You don't know what your options are, right? Because you can only see 3, maybe 4 on screen at a time. So you don't know what your possible options are. You don't know what you can and cannot do. You don't even know if users would not know if that is even the thing they want to do, right? They don't even know if it's going to work for them because it doesn't provide a good overview. You can't really see them. Again, and also too, misclicks are very likely to happen. And so, for something like this. And of course, their big thing is like, we want to save space. And I'm like, so I told them, I said, okay. I said, well, we can try, we can look into it. I said, but here's the thing: these chips got to be good size. I was like, they got to be at least 32 pixels big, right? Can't be too dominating to be 40. And that's the other thing, like, they're really not that useful because, I mean, once you set what you want, you don't need them anymore, right? So why are they still on screen? Sometimes it goes, but it's not a very elegant solution either. And so their idea was, we'll have these chips in a and that's the other thing too, is that some of these databases have longer names than the other. So the chips are different sizes as well, which, I mean, it's like, okay. But it's like, sometimes if you get 2 really long names, you can only have 2 chips on screen at a time. Like, even 32, I'm like, is really tiny to be messing with. I'm like, those are touch targets. So you gotta have again, looking here. Again, you're not saving space. You're not losing a ton of space. Like, but this is not helping us to, right? So, that honestly pressed really hard for, because they like the idea of being able to see the status, the validation status right on the screen, having to go somewhere else. Which I'm like, I like that too. Concept, yeah, I like that too. But again, we have a lot other things to contend with. Like I said, the issues with this is that it's like, kind of like the issues are still there, right? I'll just rewrite it out, right? Provide some clarity, right? regarding provide some clarity regarding the validation. But the problems are still there. The validation can still be messy, right? It can still light speed jumping all over the place. That still can exist, right? They still, and the requirement, and users still don't know what the requirements are, right? They have to know, right? And it's like, for example, let's say that, they need to, if they want to make this search, they need to know the seed content, of this fruit, right? But they don't know that's a requirement. And then until then they're like, oh, I need to know the seed content. Well, then I can't do this. This isn't the tool for me, right? But they don't find out much later. So I'm like, there has to be some sort of way to communicate to them that what the requirements are. They need to know, okay? And their thing was, oh, they'll know. They'll know. No, they won't. You cannot assume that they'll know. They won't know. Through training, they'll know. No, no, they won't. No, they will not. Again, I'm like, let's say that's even true. That still doesn't make this a good design. This is still not scalable. This is still not going to work, right? Right. So what I had, and again, they wanted to continue down this track. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and put this disclaimer. This was the project manager. So what I said was, I'm like, okay, then there needs to be, and I explained like the problem with the chips, like I said, we're just trying to brute force this. It's really not going to work. And so said, no matter what we do with the chips, we still have to provide. We still need to know what they need to do, what their requirements are to finish their task. Need to know if that even is the task for them, right? They have to know. And so I said, okay, what do you recommend, right? So I said, we're gonna continue down this path. Like, we need to have, sure, we'll have something to indicate validation, right? But all it does is provide a status of the validation. So what I said, so the way this would work is that, would open up another menu. It would be hit. You tap on it, right? It would open the menu. Then you would have the list of all of the have like the name of the database. There'd be like a little toggle, right? So it enables them to be able to turn on and off. Below that, a list of there would be to the right of it over here for each one, it would tell you if you're good or not. I believe the required fields was collapsible, but I'm going to right. So this is the other approach. Validation can be up here. Like having a side menu where it has everything you need, right? You're able to pick and choose your databases, right? There'll be a validation, there'll be a visual right here to let you know if you meet requirements or not, and you can view the required fields, right? It does all of it, puts them off the side so you can focus more. Right? Provide some clarity on the validation. Again, but the validation can still be messy though, right? It can still, the lights can be all over the place. It adds some meaning to it, right? But it still jumps all over the place, right? I told him, I was like, here, but of course they didn't like that. Like, well, they don't like the fact that it's hidden behind a menu. Explain, I'm like, the thing is, there are certain criteria that we have to meet, right? That there's certain problems that we must solve. They must be solved. They must be solved. And this also has to be scalable, right? We can't just sit here and add 50 chips forever. We just can't keep adding more chips. And like I'd explained, I said even if let's say we went with these chips examples, I'm like, they still have to know what the requirements are, right? And I'm like, so this menu has to exist. It has to exist anyway because they need to know what the requirements are, right? And I know I'm like, and of course they're like, I don't like the fact that I have to go and read. It's like, I don't like it either. I don't like it either. But no matter what happens, if done this way, they're going to have to read it, right? There's nothing you can do about it. So this is kind of how it was going. That it was like, this is the best I'm with. And then finally I had, well, um, but the solution. But like I said, we had found the solution a long time ago. I get they just didn't really like the solution. But I was able to finally share with them, here's how we do it. I'm like, in this way, it's foolproof. Nobody could screw it up. I'm like, I'm like, our internal users, the employees, I'm like, they're very specialized, right? This is an insanely, like, no human being, no person, regular person, unless you're an employee of this company, you would never, ever, 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 ever use this tool. You wouldn't even be allowed to. Let alone even know what any of the terms mean, honestly, right? And I was like, we can design this in such a way that you could grab someone off the streets and it would work, right? And so pretty much what I said was, I'm like, here's how it goes. I'm like, the problem all along has been the form. I'm like, the form is too complicated. It's, like I said, it's too complicated. And, it's like, which it's like, that's fine. I understand that the form there might be a lot of fields, right? That's one thing. I'm like, the main problem is that the form does not communicate well at all, right? The form can only communicate to you visually, right? I mean, obviously we could put instructions, right? We could put them in the field that says, oh, you need to have this or this, right? But again, with things being in different area, different places, it's like, well, how are you supposed to do that, right? I was like, and I explained, I said, instead of trying to explain to them in a literal way like this, we explain it to them using a visual language. And we do it in such a way that, people, like, nobody can misunderstand. I'm like, anybody can understand it, right? And I told them, and I was like, in fact, if we did it this way, we wouldn't actually, crazy enough, we wouldn't need validation at all. We technically wouldn't even need this. We could have it if we want, but we wouldn't even need this. Here's how I'm going to explain how it works. In fact, hold on. Before I do this, let me pull together this here. Let me see. I'm gonna kind of pull this random. I'm not gonna get super crazy. Honestly, I can. It's future-proofed, scalable, future-proofed, right? Let's say these are the database combinations, right? Grab these over here. Now I told them, I said, your first step is that, what I would say is your first step is to choose the databases you want. And then based on your choices, it would generate a form for you, right? For some reason, they didn't like that, right? I think they were like, oh, another screen before it. It's like, it's like, yeah, everyone, and that's kind of the crazy thing with mobile. Everyone's always like, oh, look at how many screens it takes. It's like, you do realize that some screens take literally a tenth of a second. It's not about how many screens, it's about how quickly, seamlessly it works, right? That's kind of one of the downfalls, I guess you could say, of showing user flows like this to stakeholders, because when they see lots of screens, they think, oh, it's going to take a long time. It's like, it's not how it works at all. What I suggested, I'm like, you either have them choose a database, continue, generates a form, right? But of course, it would be absolutely lovely if, they have the flexibility that they could change that like on the fly, right? Which my suggestion was, yeah, make it so that you can go backward, redo this, and hit continue again. But otherwise, honestly, I'm like, we could include this window here, right? We wanted to. I mean, like I said, I'm like, it's not a bad solution for, you know, you know, taking care of all their needs, right? I'm like, I know it's not elegant. I'm like, but it works, right? It works. You can do that too. But I'm like, but here's what you do. Change the form itself to communicate better. So here's a database 1. Right, database 1 has no requirements, right? So we don't need to worry about that. All right, so the first thing is let's name, color, size, and right. Name, color, size. Okay. So here's yeah. So just to spoil a little bit, here's how it communicates. I wouldn't even put or go. So this is what we start with. And to be honest with you, it wasn't the first solution I thought of either. But I just kind of realized, like, we can add stuff to the form. It doesn't have to be just a blank list of fields, right? And I was like, here you go. Name, color, size, and or field flavor. Now, of course, it's like, there you go. It communicates what you need to do. And like I said, you don't even need validation because it makes it pretty clear, right? Now, of course, this is a slight issue, though, because when you see this, it's like, okay, it could say size or flavor, or it could be maybe you need these 3 or just this one, right? So that's where spacing comes into play. Like, we could do something like that. Or, where you do it, yeah, you kind of section them off, right? And then use subheadings. So now you do it this way, there's no confusion. No confusion, right? You know that you need to have name, color, size, flavor. Let's add database 3 to it. Color, size, okay. Color, size, and throw season in there. Color, size, color, size. Name and color. Those are required for database 1. So name and color definitely have to be in. Even though it doesn't need for database 3, whatever, it's needed. Color. Color, size. So in this case, then, since size is required here, then it's going to go to the required column. Now, you look at that and you're like, well, hold on a second. Database 2, is size and, or flavor, only one. Like, yeah, but database 3 requires size no matter what. You have to have that. It must be in there if you're going to be able to do this, right? So that moves to the, required column. Now, that means that, well, flavor, it's possible. Flavor is a possibility, right? So we'll keep it. We'll keep it. But we're not putting it into, like, we're not, it's going to be kind of like an optional thing. It's color, size, season. Then there's size, right? Shape. Okay. Let's see here. So database 3, color size, right? Cell size is in both, so that means it's going to definitely be required. Same with color. And then season is needed in all those combinations. So there we go. That's going to be required as well. Season is required for any kind of thing with database 3, so season. Let's add database 4. Shape. Okay, shape is now required. Shape is required. Texture. Texture is required. Right, that's not a combination thing. Content is required. It's, you know, if they have it toggled where they want database 4, well, this is what you got to have, right? And then of course, like, so the only one that's kind of hanging out there is flavor, right? Which is like, well, you don't even need it, right? You don't have to have flavor in there to go through. But that's okay. It's optional, right? Maybe they want to add flavor. Maybe they want to add that to the search. No problem. Stick flavor in there. Following this. So like, and then keep in mind, region was also part of that form. That's fine. We could stick that. We could stick that in optional fields as well. No. Like I said, you don't even need to have this validation. You don't even need to do this, right? Because I mentioned the search button also requires is also used as validation, right? Until that button turns blue, you know that something is missing, right? So you could, this entire form, as complicated as this is, could run just using the search button as validation. Just because we designed the form to be to communicate visually better, right? No matter how complicated it can be, you know. And let's say we get rid of database number 4, right? Well, that means what? Shape is not needed, texture is not needed, speed content is not, like, it just moves to optional, right? Right, and then so this you know, it just changes around, right? I don't know. I'm gonna put up like a proper. I'm gonna build this up properly to make it just as complicated. But look at that. You like I say, you don't even need validation. But here's something really cool. It's good to have validation, though, isn't it? Well, guess what? Instead of, you know, communicating, oh, all of these fields are required, you can add the validation right here. Subheading. Make the subheading say required and make that red. Right? You know, and so, you know, let's, you know, look at this solution. let's look at this solution. Validation on the form, right? Validation is very clear, right? Like I said, you could use it just operating just using the search button. You can't get more clear than a gray and blue search button. You do it just by that, right? You know, want to do the validation, fields? That's fine. You can, do it on the, put it on the subheadings, right? So you don't have a bunch of red. The validation is clear. You really can't screw it up, right? The validation is no longer messy. Things are not changing. We don't need to do this fields jumping all over the place. Don't need to. Not needed anymore. Right? So validation is clean and clear. Users can know what the requirements are. Right? We'll be honest with you, no. They know. When it comes to what they need to complete out the form, it's right here, man. It's right here. It is required fields are all right here. Right? You could change this to required fields if you like. It can't be more clear that these are required. Right? And then users can know what the requirements are for each. All they got, they can look it up, right? And they can toggle the bases on and off. Include, that. So for complete flexibility. Go. It's perfect. Like I said, we did something like this like a year before, a year ago. Loved it. We knew the answer very clearly. We had a form. We created a form that was more complicated looking, like it had or and slash or and stuff like that. And we showed that to users. They helped us kind of come up with the right combination of stuff. We found that like I said, instead of having name, color, size, or texture, we just use subheadings to kind of section them out. And that, if we did do the name, color, size, or texture thing, like, well, yeah, then you're probably gonna need to use that validation stuff. But they were like, no, we have no problem with it's sectioned off, subheadings. That makes more sense, right? Like I said, and this is 100% scalable. You throw, like I said, you could throw a database in here that has nothing to do with fruits, right? Like, oh, it's like, meat stuff. No problem. Those would just get added to the form, right? You could, like I said, it's perfect. It works. Obviously, the more databases you add, and if they have a bunch of different fields, like, yeah, the form will continue to get longer. To where maybe it starts to go below the fold, right? It's like, yeah, that's not ideal, but that's also kind of crazy. But even in that situation, it's like easy. Like I said, you could just use just the search button for validation. So yeah, this was this was awesome. This is probably one of the coolest things I've done in my career. So stinking proud of our work. And we went through so many. These are just like some of the basic iterations. There was a lot more. At least 3 other iterations. But yeah, I'm glad we we arrived at a solution they also agreed with before my time was up, because I was like really worried about that, and it was awesome, absolutely awesome. Check my. So that's in fact, I think I'm going to do a YouTube video on this. So unfortunately, I just gave an answer away. Well, I gave a answer. About, for a UX exercise. I think I'm going to do that for a lot of these. I'm going to exercise. How would you solve this problem? Kind of thing. Maybe I'll have in there. So here's how we solved it. I think it would just be. I think these are just really. These are really. To be honest with you, it was really fun. I like running into problems because I love to be able to find a solution. But love. And then what I especially love about the challenge is it's like, well, you can't just find a solution. You have to find a solution that the customer like. And so I love that challenge. Absolutely love that challenge. So bye. So I'm definitely gonna make like a came to me last. You know what? I'm gonna do a YouTube presenting these challenges to the channel and be like, how would you solve this? And I think too, this might be something that you put in your portfolio. I mean, why not? But at the same time, if everyone same solution. Well, I'll put it this way. Even if you came to the same solution that I do, in fact, I would love to see what other solutions there must be. Absolutely. But even then, it's not about that. You put in your portfolio. It's not about us coming with the same solution. It's about you going through the process. Dude, I would love that. Oh, I would absolutely. I think I'm totally going to do it. When I do that for this one, do it for this one. Because these issues, they're not, these are issues that they would not be specific to, they would not be specific to, like, my particular user. They are more, they are like general issues. This kind of stuff here, it's like, nah, that's pretty pretty focused in on ways of. These are not issues that other people would have. I mean, I guess I could pose a scenario. But I feel like even that kind of makes it kind of messy. I don't know. We'll see. For definitely for sure, I think these two. Yeah. But man, I've been streaming for 2 hours. I completely forgot the appointment. And to be honest, this is one of the big ones I wanted to get out here. So I think I'll close up stream today. To be honest, I'll probably stream tomorrow. I don't think I have anything going on. So a little bit, but not much. So I'll probably will be streaming tomorrow. I'll probably stream if something comes up. So yeah, I'll. I'll probably end up streaming. Oh, you know what? I will see. I do project. I'll have to see. But either way, I got 3 days off this week, so I'll probably be streaming. All right, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Very much appreciate it. I hope it's been helpful, and yeah, I appreciate the support and I appreciate the company. I mean, honestly, all I'm really doing is putting stuff together in my portfolio, um, organizing. So I just, hey, why not? All right, guys, good seeing you.